Hello again and welcome to part 4. Let's just have a quick recap over what we've covered in parts 1, 2 and 3, apart from the fact that I've had my hair cut. What we should have is you should have set up your mount and precisely levelled it, and you should also have polar aligned. You should have fitted your scope and your weights to your mount, and everything should be nicely balanced, and you should also have moved your scope back to the home position. And then in your synscan controller you should have had your date, your time and your coordinates all put in, so that now we're at the stage where on the menu on the synscan it says begin alignment, yes or no. Now we're going to go in close up to the controller and just cover a couple of things, and there are a couple of things that are slightly different between revisions on the synscan controller that we'll also cover. So let's go in close up. Right, so here we are with the controller and we're in the begin alignment stage. Obviously the first thing you do is press 1 for yes. Now at this point you need to choose which alignment method, whether it be a 1, a 2 or a 3. So we'll move that to 2 and press enter. Now then, we're actually going to do the align in live screen a little bit later on, so I'm not actually going to do an alignment using the controller. We're going to talk you through that at a later stage. Now once it offers you stars to do your alignment with, don't be embarrassed about the fact that you might need to open up Stellarium or some other planetarium software and have a look where each star is, because nearly everybody does that as well. Now when you find your first star, obviously you have a list of choices that you can go through, so let's just do an imaginary alignment. Right, now under normal circumstances at this point we would centre our object before choosing enter. So like I say, we're going to cover that later. You will just centre your star and press enter, then choose your second star, enter again, same thing for our second star. Again we would use the arrow keys to centre before pressing enter, and you'll get the alignment successful message. And like I said, we're going to cover that part a little bit later on. Okay, once we've done our 2-star alignment, we're going to choose a bright star that's near to our object, and again we're going to cover that in live screen a little bit later on. But just to show you that you would press object, named star, enter, choose whichever star it is and press enter to go to that star. View object, enter. Right, now this is the point where different controllers behave differently. If that star is not in the centre of your reticule, on some controllers you will press and hold escape for 2 seconds and it will give you a realignment screen. On mine I don't, I need to press escape and then hold escape for 2 seconds, and you will get this message, recentering object, and it will name the object. Now at that point use the arrow keys to centre your object. Once you've got that object centred, press enter. Now a little trick that you can also do if you forget to do the sort of the escape and everything, what you can do is actually just use your arrow keys and slew to your object, then you can press escape, and instead of using your arrow keys further, just press enter, and it'll take in the whatever you've altered on your arrow keys previously. Now if you want to recheck that position and just make sure that you have got it right, what you can do is hold in the ID key to identify, and first of all it'll search and then it'll tell you if you've got it centered. You'll get 0.00 or something very close to it, which means that your realignment and your adjustments of centering that star have worked, because it's reset the coordinates for that star, and you actually now taught your synscan a little bit more precise mapping on that particular part of the sky. At this point then you would escape and choose your object, so be it a Messier or an NGC or whichever, and put your numbers in, press enter, and away you go. And as I said a little bit later on, we're going to do all this in live screen for you to just illustrate it a little bit more clearly. Right, we're now in the default sharp cap screen, which my default sharp cap screen is one that I've set up myself. You basically set up a profile, meaning that you set up the exposure and gain and resolution and everything, and save it, and then you can set as default, so that my sharp cap always launches with these same settings. And there's a reason for that, and we'll go through those settings. Obviously I've got the normal YU/Y2 for my colour space compression, and my frame rate's at 10 and my resolution's at 640 before 80. Most importantly, I have exposure is all the way up, and so is gain. We'll come back to that. But my other settings then, I have backlight compression all the way down, colour enable all the way up, gamma in the middle, saturation I prefer, it's a personal thing, but I just prefer to keep it up, just that little bit up from centre. Contrast again is in the middle, and brightness is in the middle. Now underneath you may see the focuser controllers. I use a USB focuser controller that operates through SharpCap. So as we work through this tutorial, you'll see me actually focusing using those. Now back up to the top again, the exposure and gain, and the reason why we've got those up all the way to the full. The thing is that at this point we're aligning, and we're just basically trying to get the object into the field of view. So if we have exposure and gain all the way up, it means that just any slight dim light is gonna show up hugely. At this point we're not after quality, we're just interested in getting the object in the field of view. And obviously you've read all over the place about people that struggle to even get such a Saturn in the field of view. So the brighter we make it, then obviously the easier it is to get it in. So what we're going to do next is we're going to actually do some aligning. Right, at this point in the procedure, we're going to do an alignment, and the first thing we want to do is switch on the reticule in SharpCap. That gives us crosshairs going across the field of view, and it'll help with centering and everything. And we'll just cover a couple of tips and tricks as we work along with this. Now, as you slew over to your first alignment star in your synscan, don't worry if it doesn't appear in the field of view, because that happens to all of us, and the first one especially usually won't. Now, I will say at this point that if you haven't got one, I would seriously consider investing in a Telrad, because they're absolutely worth the weight in gold for this sort of procedure. Now at this point in this video, what I would be doing now is the scope's slewed over and it's bleeped and said that it's on my star, and obviously it's not. So I've gone round and I've looked through my Telrad, and I'm now altering the slewing of my scope to just bring that star into the field of view. Now, because the exposure and gain are turned all the way up, I know that, when I do get on it, there is something going to show up. It might be well out of focus, but because this camera's set so sensitive, we're going to get something in there. So as we get that star into the field of view, and there it is, out of focus, the next thing that I do is move round, and you'll see the image shake as I trip over the tripod, because yes, we all do that as well. Now, also, if you look at that image, I know full well that the voices will be there now, and I do a bit of mind reading and say, oh yes, I can see his collimation's out a bit there. And yeah, it is. It should be a nice central concentric, and it's not. That's since been cured. But what I concentrate on next is actually centering that object onto my crosshairs and getting it somewhere similar. And don't worry about it if you end up going backwards and forwards and that, because you still forget which direction each button on your synscan makes your scope go. We all do it. It's not any big problem. And then at this point, you'll see that I start to focus up on my star, on my first star. And we're actually going to kill two birds with one stone at this point, because what I do is, once I've got my star into sort of a semi-focus and I've started to get it centered up again, you'll see that what I do is I put on my Batinov mask. And when I've put on my Batinov mask, I also launch a piece of software called Batinov Grabber that we're going to introduce you to. So, as I said, first of all, we'll bring that star into sort of a semi-focus, and then we'll work on centering it a little bit more. Well, we've now got that star exactly in the centre of those reticules in that preview screen. Now at this point, what I would do is go back to your Telrad if you have one, and your finder. Now firstly, get your Telrad and calibrate your Telrad and get that star exactly in the centre of your Telrad. and have a look at your laptop screen again just to make sure that nothing's moved out of synchronization and that start is still exactly centered. And then double check, just look at your tell rod again, get that start dead in the center. The next thing you want to do is go to your finder and do exactly the same thing. Now with your finder, it's sometimes hard to see your reticules in your finder. So what I would do is take a torch, just take your red light torch and shine it off to one side in your finder so that you light your reticules up a little bit. And again, alter your finder and get that start exactly in the middle of your reticules in your finder. Again, look at your laptop screen and compare the two so that now you know that you've got your camera, your telescope, your sharp cap, your finder, your tell rod are all showing you exactly the same thing. They're all calibrated to each other. And what that's done then is that if ever you have trouble putting something into your field of view again, you've got 3 different tools that you can look at that are all synchronized, and eventually you'll just bring things in really easily, and it takes away that struggle with trying to just get an object into the field of view. At this point, what we're going to do next is, once we've got everything synchronized and we've got that star in the center, is we're going to try and use our Batinov mask to get perfect focus. So up to the top and just switch the reticule off for a moment. And if you haven't got a Batinov mask, it's another thing that I know I keep trying to spend your money for you, but it's one of the best £15 you'll probably ever spend on Astro gear. And if not, then have a search around, because there's lots of places where you can download templates to make them out of cardboard and everything. So what we would do next is hang the Batinov mask over the front of the telescope, and that'll create this reticule effect that we see now. Now, a little trick with sharp cap where you can actually brighten up those graticules is move over and switch your frame rate from 10 to 5, and you'll see that once the software's updated, that those graticules now, they'll become a lot more brilliant, like so. Just makes things a little bit easier to see. Now when you set your default sort of scheme up in sharp cap, you might even want to try setting it at 5 and keeping it there. Just make things even more brighter. So at this point we launched Batinov Grabber, which is a free piece of software, and it's absolutely brilliant and very simple to use. And what we do is you basically set a capture area, just click the button, set capture area, and you outline the area, your graticule pattern on your image, like so. And eventually, once the software is updated, you'll see like a visual representation, and you'll also see a numerical representation of your level of focus. Now here, as you can see, I'm using my laptop, and I'm going to just have to move the windows about a little bit, rearrange things so that I can see both windows at the same time, because I've got to be able to see my preview screen, and I've got to be able to focus, and I've still got to be able to watch the Batinov Grabber screen as well. Now, if you look at the Batinov Grabber screen there, you can see the yellow concentric circles. That's actually telling you that you're in focus and within tolerances. You know, it's critical enough there for you to be able to image and get decent results. So once I've finished sort of faffing about and getting my windows lined up and being able to get at where I want to and be able to see what I want to, what I'll do is I'll start to mess about with my focus. I'll first of all just change my step size on my focuser, and then again move the Batinov Grabber screen over a little bit where I can't quite see it. And as you can tell, this was done live, and I'm having to narrate it at a later point. So now we can see the Batinov Grabber screen, and that I'm just using my focus moving in and out that little bit just to try and get it that little bit better, and watching those numbers as well as the image there. Now, like I said, Batinov Grabber is free. Just do a Google for it and download it. It is a brilliant piece of software if you've got a Batinov mask. So there we go. We do the focus, and it's like really close now. You know, those numbers are very, very low. So now we can just switch off Batinov Grabber. It's done its job. And what we're going to do then is just lock up the focuser and remove your Batinov mask from the front of your telescope. And then we put Sharp Cap back into full screen. I just like to work with Sharp Cap in full screen all the time. So what we'll do next is just take off the Batinov mask, and we know that now is perfectly focused. Next, it's time to turn the reticule back on again in Sharp Cap, because next we've got to hit our second alignment star. So again, you just choose your second alignment star, click on enter, and the scope will go slowing off. Now, 9 times out of 10, your second alignment star will become in the field of view, unlike your first one. You know, if it doesn't, then again, you've already calibrated your finder and your telrad and everything, so you can just use the same process as we've already discussed. So once your second alignment star appears in the field of view, or not as the case may be, the same thing again, just centre that star, and once you have got it centred, what you do then is just press enter, and you will get a message on your synscan screen that says alignment successful. I've never yet seen a sign that says alignment unsuccessful. Now, I always use just a 2-star align, and it's perfectly adequate. In fact, the 3-star, that third star is actually to eliminate something called cone errors, which is for another tutorial, and it just starts to get a little bit more technical. So, you know, it's not necessary at the moment. Right, we've now got our alignment successful message, and it's time to actually hit our target. Now, this is where I'm going to teach you another little trick, because what you do is you decide what target you're going to go for. Have a look in, say, Stellarium or whatever planetary software you're using, and find the nearest bright star to that object. And if you go in objects in your synscan controller and named stars, find that star and just go to it. Now, when you do go to it, it's possible that it might not be dead centre. As you can see, we've just gone now to this star that's near to our object. We've actually gone to Castor, and the object that we want to do eventually is going to be a very small and dim globular cluster, and I've chose a hard subject on purpose just to show you that, you know, we can go quite far with this process. And the object that we're going to go for is NGC 2419. So let's just cover a little bit about accuracy when we go to our other objects. Now, as we said, we've just gone to an object. We've chosen an object now that we've aligned and chose to go to it. If you go to that object and you find that it's not central and it's, you know, quite a way off, what you do on a synscan handset is there's 2 different variations. One of them, you hold in the escape button for 2 seconds and you'll get a message on your screen that says realigning, and it'll name whichever object it is that you're supposed to be pointing at. Some versions, what you do is you press escape and then you press escape again and hold it for 2 seconds, and you'll get the realigning message. Once you get the realigning message, just use your arrow keys, center that object and press enter. Now, it's called PAE, this procedure, and it stands for Pointing Accuracy Enhancement. And what it does, if you do that on an object in the sky where it is out and you do realign it, and, you know, like I said, just do a realign with the arrow keys, your synscan learns and it maps the sky in whatever particular area you're pointing at until it builds up a better picture and a more accurate picture of the sky in general. So once we've gone to this star that's near our object, what we do next is choose our actual object. Again, we've still got the reticule on, but that's going to come off in a moment as we move to our object, because, you know, we're looking for sort of a dimmer sort of subject then. So what we're going to do next is slew over to our object, which will be, as I said, NGC 2419. Okay, so we've chosen our object and we've pressed enter on the synscan, and off it goes and starts to go to our object. Now, once it actually gets there, obviously we're not going to see very much. So once the telescope comes to a stop, a couple of things that we need to do now are, firstly, we need to turn off the reticule in sharp cap. Then we need to go to our telescope and get the camera and switch the camera to LX mode. So once we've switched our camera to LX mode, we've then got to adjust sharp cap to go into LX mode itself. Now you see the stars just shake about a little bit there as myself had switched the camera to LX mode. So next, up to cameras and choose SPC LX mode. Once we've done that and the software is updated, we next go back over to where the profiles are, because I've actually set another profile in sharp cap that I use for starting off with my LX imaging. So we'll just launch that, and again the software will just have to update, and then we'll go through what settings I use on me, if you like, my start profile for LX imaging. So there we go, the software just starts to update itself, and we'll just work through the settings. Now, we've got quite a lot of noise on the screen at the minute because, number one, we've gone into LX mode, and number two, I've also got a lot of software running on the laptop at the same time when I was doing all this, the screen grab software and everything. So what we'll do next is just go through those settings for that profile, which are basically just the same as with the short exposure profile we had, except that this time we have the frame rate is set to 5 frames per second and the exposure is set to 1, which is 1 second, but we still have the gain all the way up. And what we do next is we start to nudge up the exposure, not touching the gain. We start to nudge up the exposure until we start to see something appear on the screen. Now, as I said before, we did get quite a few anomalies at this point, and it's caused by the screen grabbing software running and the capturing going on at the same time, which resulted in like quite a lot of noise and just strange artifacts on the preview screen, and also quite a few drop frames. But as you can see, we're starting to nudge the exposure up little by little, and we're watching for a result in that preview screen. And eventually, as you do start to nudge that exposure up, you should start to see your object start to appear. And as I said, just keep nudging up little by little. And it's you need quite a bit of patience at this point. And sometimes you're not there, you're just not on your object. And sometimes have another go for a different object, try something else. Sometimes you go for a golden eagle and you end up with a sparrowhawk, and it's just it's the same with astronomy and with this go-to routine. It's just sometimes the object's just not right for the night. Anyway, on this occasion, as we move over, you can see there's something just starting to appear there, and it is right in the centre of the field of view, which means that it did actually pay off, this going to the nearest bright star and centering on that first. So what we start to do now is back the gain off, and as we back the gain off, you'll start to get rid of that noise, and your actual object, although darker, will start to become clearer. And what we do at this point is we're starting to up the exposure and drop the gain down. The gain will get rid of the noise, and obviously it'll darken the image. The exposure going up will compensate for that, and you start to get a little bit more clarity, your object's there. And you sort of get a feel for it. Sometimes you've got to look at your laptop screen at an angle to see the object appear. And different objects just appear at different brightnesses anyway, and it's just something that you get used to. Once you've done a couple, you start to find it quite a bit easier. So as you can see, we're starting to just get that object to appear. And the thing is you start to up that exposure, it means that you've got to wait that little bit longer, for your next picture to update. And like I say, it's a patience game. So at this point, I'm just going to speed things up a little bit. Right, we've now cut a chunk of time out, and it's moved along a little bit. And at this point, what we'll do is we'll point out something that you'll see on the screen, which are these, and what we call hot pixels. You might see some that are coloured, either red or blue, sometimes the white. Don't worry about them, because later on when we take darks, we'll actually get rid of those completely, and every CCD has them on anyway. And as you can see, another frame's about to take, and let's have a look. It's still going to need even more work on it. It's still going to need that exposure knocking up a little bit. So again, what we'll do is I'll just cut this section out and we'll move on. Right, I'm now fairly happy with what I'm seeing in my preview screen, and I'm thinking that, I'm going to get a fairly decent image out of this. It's something that comes with practice, you just sort of get used to it, and this is a particularly dim subject. So what we're going to do next is click on File, and we're going to choose our capture folder, which is, just where we're going to save to. In this case, I'm just choosing desktop, and this version of SharpCap, it will actually create a folder with the images in it now on the desktop. So we click on Start Capture, and we choose how many frames we're going to use. Now I prefer to use the number of frames method for it, and I tend to choose 25 for DSOs. 25 frames and 10 darks is sort of my little habit that I've got into. So once we've clicked on Start, that is now going to start taking our images, and you'll notice down at the bottom that we've got the two bars. We've got the frames left bar, and we've also got a bar indicating our particular frame, which is how far through that frame we've actually gone. Now, with me being at 5 frames per second, I like to keep the gain quite low down, so at 24, 25 as my maximum. Now our exposures are 84 seconds, which means now at 25 frames we're going to have to wait 25 times 84 seconds, which is, it's quite a wait. And at this point I'll usually go inside and have a cup of coffee. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave this image in, and I'm going to speed it up so that you can see the images taken, but sped up. Right, here we go. This is the increased speed imaging session. And it's going to take those 25 frames rather quickly. You might notice that there's a couple of anomalies there and a few drop frames and everything, and as I said before, that's due to the strain on the CPU from the screen capture software and everything. That doesn't usually happen. Now once this set of frames is finished, what you'll get is the box will come up and say capture complete, just like that one. Now at this point we're going to want to take some darks. Now for darks, what we do is we then put the cap on the scope and set up to take another 10 frames. I usually take 10. Again, you just sort of get into your own little habit and your happy medium. And basically what darks are is you're not capturing any data at that point. All you're doing is you're taking pictures of the noise from the actual camera and any hot pixels and amp glow and everything, because they'll still show up. What we'll do is we'll start taking our darks, and we'll show you an example of a dark. Once we've done that, I'll then move on and just show you this image processed from this actual image session. So like I said, we need to take 10 darks. So the cap's on the scope, and we move up and click start capture again. Number of frames again, and like I said, set it up to 10. Like so, and then click on start, and again it's another little wait. So it's like go and make another cup of coffee, or get a piece of cake or some biscuits, or something. Now let's just have a look what a dark looks like. Right, and here we go with the dark. If you have a look at it, there's no image detail in there, but you can see that these hot pixels are in there. In the top left hand corner you can see some amp glow. Like I say, it's just basically a noisy image. This is what will be taken away from our completed images when we get to the stacking process. And next what we're going to do is just take a look at what we've just imaged, and after it's been processed, so you can see the sort of results that we've had. Right, so here it is. This is our finished NGC 2419. As I said, it's a very, very difficult subject. It's a very, very small globular cluster. And quite dim, and it's really pushing the limits, to be honest, with the webcam. What we're going to do next is, now that we've done a hard one, I'll show you a couple of easier ones just to give you an idea of how they look on your laptop screen when you're trying to hit these different objects. Right, as promised, we're now going to use the same procedure on another couple of objects. I've already moved over to my named star that is the nearest one to my object that I want to move to. As you can see, I've got the reticule, and again I've just centered that star, and again I've got my startup configuration in SharpCap. So the next thing that we're going to do is just slew over to the object, and here we go. Right, we're on the move, and as soon as we hit where our object is and synscan sort of beeps and says, that I've got there, what we do next is we move up and switch off the reticule. Now the thing is that even at a 1 second exposure, sometimes you'll see the slightest hint of your object, and the sharp-eyed of you might see it there now. There's just that slightest trace of an object there. And as we just move the exposure up to just 2 seconds and it brightens up, you can actually see that there are two colours there, which is your clue really to what our object's going to be. And like I say, at only 2 seconds, we know that we've hit on target. So again, we start to just move that exposure up, and now it's gone up to 7 seconds, and you'll just see it start to get a little bit brighter and a little bit brighter. And we'll just do the same thing over really. We start to nudge that exposure up and then start to compensate by bringing the gain down and taking that noise out. So let's just have a look at the same object now, with the exposure turned up, and you can see what it looks like at different numbers of seconds. Right, so the next one's going to be at 17 seconds, and you see now that the noise is starting to come up quite a bit, but we're also starting to see more of the colours and some detail in the dust lanes there. So as we boost up even more with the exposure, Now we're starting to wash out and the noise is just awful, but you can see quite a lot of detail there in the lanes, in the spirals of M51. Now the next thing that we're going to do is start to back off on the gain, like so. Now we've got the exposure at 66 and we've backed the gain right down to 25. And at this point then you're just starting to tweak up that exposure until, like I said before, you get something that you're quite happy with. Now at this point, you know, it's starting to look okay, but I think it needs a little bit more. And there we are now at 95 seconds. And, you know, just at that, if you had that on your laptop, I think you'd be quite happy with it. You know, there's quite a bit of detail there. And this is the one that I would decide to go for. I would run my 25 frames at that and my 10 darks and process that, and it'll turn out and make quite a nice photo. So let's just go on to another object. Okay, so now we're doing exactly the same thing over again. We've moved to another bright named star that's near to our object that we're actually looking for, and the same thing, the reticule on, and the exposure at 1 second and the gain all the way up. It's a good habit to get into this, and it just helps you to flow, you know, and it starts to bring things together. So once you've centered that star, you start to slew off to your object. And once your synscan's beeped at you again and told you that it's hit the object, then the same thing, you turn your reticule off. Now, certain objects, they just scream out at you as soon as you get there, even at the 1 second exposure, and you might just be able to see that one there. So let's just turn the seconds up a little bit more on the exposure, and we'll take it up to 1.5, and it just starts to come up that little bit more in the noise there. And then again, we just start to tweak it up and give it a little bit more exposure. And now there we go at sort of 3.5 seconds, and you definitely can see what that object is. You know, and it's the noise is still there, of course, and it's a bit like poltergeist film. You know, don't touch the screen because someone will come jumping out and grab you. Right, so now we've turned the gain down, and we've got the exposure up to 34 seconds there, and it's starting to make a really nice picture as it is. So again, it's the same thing. It's just a matter of bringing the exposure up once you've got that gain down to sort of 24, 25, and just making it until it looks right. And, you know, it's like I said, I can't give you a set number of seconds for every object, because every object's different, every telescope, and, you know, everything will be completely different. It's just all trial and error. But at least with this, I'm giving you an idea of what it should look like roughly on your laptop screen. So now, as you can see, we've tweaked it up, and it's starting to make a really, really nice picture at that. And at this point, I might be thinking, shall I take it at that, or shall I just give it a little bit more? You know, sometimes just give it a little bit more, and if you find it looks a bit too over much, then just back it off a bit. So finally on this one, we've gone up to 89 seconds there, and I think that is where I'd start to take my image again, and again it'd be sort of 25 frames and 10 darks. Now, there's nothing stopping you if you've got a really good image like this one. You know, I mean, if you looked at that now, if you got that on your laptop screen and it's like one of your first ones, it's one of them where you're going to sort of grab your wife and your kids and say, look at this, look at this. And then I would say, right, well, if you're setting your frames up to take your frames, take 30, take 35 to be sure that you've got it. Because, you know, sometimes it's a really good night and just objects just absolutely scream out at you, and you really don't want the disappointment of sort of getting it in and processing it and it turn out absolutely awful. And, you know, that's about it for this one. So once again, thanks for watching.